me, but as a kid, there was very limited ways that they could help me because when you're a kid and you need help with homework, for example, math, they numbers are okay, but when it became down to like English, them not being able to speak and write was really difficult, and that obviously also affected me. I was English was my second language, so Spanish was my first language, and so just even the writing and the reading was a little bit of an obstacle, and you'll see that again when I mention this a little later. But as a kid, I really had to figure out a way to like do things a little bit on my own, and I think that actually did benefit me in the long run because I sort of developed this scientific mind. Like when you think of scientists, scientists are always trying to figure things out. They're going through their processes of scientific methodology, but they're trying to figure things out. They're trying to solve a problem or come to a solution. And as a kid, I feel like looking back on it, I sort of was developing that part of my brain a little bit because I had to do things sort of on my own as I was moving through elementary and into middle school. Um, but it was fine. It was just part of the deal. My dad had to work a lot. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and again, neither one of them really spoke or read English, and so it was really difficult for them to be able to help me with certain things. But I was lucky enough that because I had this sort of intuitive mind and very sort of investigative sort of component to it, uh, there was two things that I leaned towards, and I really fell in love with science. But those two things were space and the ocean. Like those were my two loves growing up as a kid, and basically up to about seventh grade, I really that's when I decided that I want to become a marine biologist. And the reason for that was that as I was reading books, I would always see these statements written on there that we knew more about space than we did about the ocean, or we knew more about certain areas than we did about the ocean. And so that intrigued me. Like again, being sort of having this investigative component in my head, I was like, oh man, I want to learn more about the ocean. Nobody knows much about it, and this is what I want to do. And so I was lucky enough that from an early age, I kind of knew that that's where I wanted to go. And so you guys are probably not going to relate to this because back in the day there was no internet, and so I was literally checking out books at the library, going looking up encyclopedias and looking things up and getting information that way. But then when I got to high school, for me, high school was a little bit of a struggle for a couple of reasons. As a student, as an eighth grader, even though I was definitely not popular, and Mr. D can attest to that, we were not popular at all. But as an eighth grader, you feel like, okay, I'm the big person on campus. Like, I know where things are. I know how things work, right? I know the process of classes and things of that nature. And you come to high school, it's like, oh, whoa, like it's a bigger school. You don't feel like you fit in. You're a little lost. And for me, it took me a while to sort of get acclimated to that. Lucky enough, I had obviously some friends there, and we played sports. But it took me, I would say, a good solid year for me to sort of feel like, okay, I kind of get the how things run here. And then as soon as you hit like 10th grade, now they start telling you, okay, you need to get ready for graduation. You need to get ready for college. You need to figure all these things out. And so I sort of look back and think that for me, high school like was a blur. Like it went by super fast. And I don't know, some people as students, you guys probably feel like it's taken a while, but trust me, I think when you guys leave and you guys look back 10 years later, you'll be like, man, high school just it like flew by, right? Everything happened in such a blur. But the problems that I had in high school also stemmed from the fact that, I didn't ask questions. I just went to class. The teachers were in front of me. They would give us the lesson, tell us, hey, don't forget, read chapter 3 tomorrow. And I just did what they said. And I didn't bother to ask any questions about things that either I didn't understand or even just intuitive questions that I had that I was interested in. And that's going to come back. That's going to come back again. But I'll mention that I think as high school kids, asking questions is critically important. And I just don't mean about asking questions about content in class, but one of the things that I didn't do was talk to my teachers about what college was like because no one in my family went to college. I had no idea what that experience was like. And so if I were to do something different, I would definitely in high school reach out to anyone. It doesn't have to be your teacher. It could be your neighbor, it could be a family friend, someone that had an experience that may be beneficial to you. Especially if you were thinking of going into a specific field, I would strongly suggest you ask to see if they know somebody that is in that field. And that way you can ask questions specifically pertaining to what you want to do as a career. Because the extra information, the extra knowledge you get from that is very, very important. Um, but high school again, bit of a struggle. Once that sort of scenario came where we had to get ready for college, and I went to go talk to my counselor, I remember vividly that back then the counselor handed me 2 sheets of paper, said, "Here's a college application, here's a FAFSA form, fill them out." And I just grabbed them and said, "Okay." Didn't ask any questions. I had no idea what the heck I was doing. I filled them out as best I could, and I left some boxes blank because I didn't know what the hell they were asking me. Uh, but at that moment, my parents, because I had to sort of involve them in this because I needed to know their financial information, they obviously saw that I was doing things for college. They're like, "Oh, so where are you thinking of going, and what do you want to study?" And having done some sort of investigative information, I knew that San Diego State was supposed to be like this really good school for marine bio. Right? And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to go to San Diego State. I want to be an Aztec, and I'm going to do marine biology." And as soon as the words marine biology came out of my mouth, my parents' eyes like opened up and they're like, "What? Like, what is that? Like, what are you going to do with that?" And I was like, "I don't know. I love the ocean. And so I really don't know what I'm going to do." And so they're like, "Well, is it going to make a lot of money?" And I was like, "I don't think so." And they were like, "Yeah, no, you need to figure out what you're going to do, and you need to find a career that's going to make you money." And then they gave me the whole, not to say that it wasn't a good speech. They gave me the whole speech of, "We came to this country and struggled, and we're still struggling. Your family members are struggling. You're not going to go to school and waste all this time and all this money if you're going to end up with a career that's not going to pay you very well." But if you talk to my friends, they will tell you that I can be somewhat hard headed, and I felt like, no, this is what I want to do. I love learning about ocean. I love learning about the marine organisms. This is what I want to do. And so they were not happy. They were really sort of upset with the choices that I was making in terms of the career path that I was sort of choosing at that time. And it was tough for me because, to some degree they were always supportive, but they weren't fully supportive because, again, they couldn't help me with certain things with school. They couldn't help me with some of my homework. They didn't understand the language. It was sort of like, "Hey, you need to figure that out." And so I really felt like that part of it, when they decided that, marine biology is not a good choice, was their way of saying no. Like, you were not going to accept what you decided to do. So that was a bit tough for me. Um, but luckily, I had to fill out the applications, turn them in. And back then, when you filled out the college application, you could apply to like 4 schools for free. And so I did San Diego State, obviously. I ended up doing Cal State LA because I figured it's pretty close by, just to be safe. And then I picked one school that had the weirdest name, so I picked Humboldt State. And then just so happened that while I was in school at Montebello, our counselor set up a campus visit to Cal State Long Beach. And because some of my friends who were on the volleyball team were going, I was like, "Yeah, I'll go with you guys. Yeah, I'm going to go to San Diego State, but I'll just go chill with you guys." And when I went to that campus, I realized that they also had a pretty good program. And so when I was filling out the application, I said, I'll just fill it in just because it's free. Having this mindset that that's all I wanted to do was go to San Diego State. So when I got the letters back, I got accepted to all of them except Cal State LA. I don't know why, but Cal State LA said no. So I was like, all right, cool, San Diego State, awesome. I get the packet from San Diego State, and like life hit me in the face. It was, here's the cost for dorming, here is the cost for tuition, here is the cost for your meal plan, here are your supply costs, which are books and everything else. And next thing you know, I have a paper in front of me that says it's going to cost me like $18,000 to go to school. And again, counselors, I never asked the questions about scholarships, never asked the questions about, taking out student loans and how you can defer some of those payments. I had no clue how any of that stuff worked. So in my mind, it was, shoot, I got to pay $18,000 if I want to go to the school. There's no way I can afford that. There's no way my parents can afford that. At the time, I was only working at Rio's Pizza, and this is going to sound really bad, but minimum wage back then was like $3.75. So there's no way I was going to pay $18,000 to go to school on a job that was only paying like $4 an hour. So my decision literally was, $18,000 to go to San Diego State? Yeah, I guess I'm going to Cal State Long Beach. That literally was the decision-making process for me. Now, had I had most of the information about how I could have paid for school, I don't know if my decision would have been different, but I definitely know that I would have taken more time to make my decision on where I wanted to go, because I really wanted to go to San Diego State. But I didn't know that I could have applied to a bunch of these scholarships. I didn't know that there was all these other options for me. So that again, please keep in mind that you should ask as many questions as possible. You can get all the information that you can. But I went to Cal State Long Beach, and I don't regret it because it was a great experience. And obviously, I've done a lot of things since then. But once I got to college, I was literally the same type of student that I was in high school, and that is not a very good thing. In high school, again, I just sat in class, listened to the teachers, asked very few questions, and in college I did the same. Stayed in the back of the room. Didn't even know what office hours were. I remember the first semester I had my bio class. I bumped into a guy going to the library, and he said, "Hey man, did you finish that report?" And I was like, "What report are you talking about?" He's like, "The one that's due today." And I was like, "I don't remember the teacher saying anything." He's like, "It's in the syllabus, man." And I was like, "Oh crap." And it was the first that time that I was like, you know what? This is completely different. I need to be on top of everything. I'm responsible for all the things that I need to do. And that just not goes for assignments. It went for everything else as I learned throughout my years in college. I spent 6 years doing my undergrad because I majored in marine biology. I love animals, so I also did zoology and a minor in chemistry. But it took me 3 years of me being in school before I realized that we had a tutoring center on campus, that there was a writing center on campus, that there was a learning research center on campus. And that's something that I drive to my students now. Like, there's so many resources on campus for you. And it's not just about all about education. We have resources that help students with if you need food, we have pantries. If you need school supplies, we have agencies that sort of work with that. We have counseling. We have everything on campus. So anytime you feel like you need something, there is help for you at whatever schools you guys end up going to. So keep that in mind because I didn't think about it. I didn't think about supplemental instruction when I was taking some of these courses, and I struggled mightily through some of them. And most of the struggles that I had go back to what I mentioned at the beginning. My family coming from Mexico couldn't really help me with my English, and English was a struggle for me. My writing was a struggle for me. And one of the reasons I fell in love with science in my head was because, oh man, I get to do research, I get to investigate, I get to do all these experiments, and none of that did I ever think I needed writing. And I'm here to tell you that there's a lot of writing in science. You write grants, you write proposals, you write, your theses. I mean, there's so much writing. So when I was taking even general ed courses in college, I felt like I kind of understood the material, but I was getting C's because every time I turned in a report, it was poorly written. And it took me, like I said, 3 years before I realized that there was a writing resource center on campus that I could have used and utilized to improve my writing, which would have helped me a lot in my science courses as well. So again, I struggled through some of those courses. Now, some of the courses I graded, and I did obviously grading marine bio class, my ecology class, my physiology class, all that stuff I did fine in. But there were some courses definitely were heavy on the writing, and I was struggling through that. But my life changing sort of moment came when I took my physiology course in my third year. Um, I fell in love with the concept of how things work. And I always had this sort of idea in my head, and it's going to sound really dumb and cheesy. And I, even to this day, when people talk to me and we talk about research, I tell them my one of my goals was always to try to save the planet, and so one of my goals was always to try to figure out something that I could do to help, improve the situation that we're in. And so when I learned about physiology and how things actually function, I said, "Oh, this is perfect," because I've always been interested in how humans essentially screw things up, and if I can pair up how human impact can affect organismal function, that'd be awesome. So I went and I spoke to the instructor, and it was one of the first times in my college career, the first time where I was very proactive. I went to his office and I said, "I hear you have a lab that does research on physiology. I want to participate. I want to volunteer." And he was like, "Good enough." He's like, "All right, so show up on Friday." He's on. We'll talk about it. And I showed up that Friday. He was having a lab meeting with his grad students. And at the end of the meeting, he said, "There's two new people in the lab. He's like, Alan and Jesus. So, say hi to them." And I was like, "Okay, I guess I'm in the lab." It was pretty simple. Um, but that was life changing for me because hands on experience is going to be worth its weight in gold for you, for any of you. Depending on what fields you go in, it doesn't matter. Like anytime you can get yourself some actual hands-on experience, it's going to be extremely beneficial. You're going to learn a bunch of different skill sets. You're going to learn different techniques depending on which fields you go into, and all of those are going to be they're going to optimize your ability to do certain things. And so I learned a tremendous amount of research skills in this lab. I learned from some of the best scientists that I can honestly say, I mean, personally, this is just my 2 cents, that some of the grad students that taught me were some of the best scientists that I've ever come across. And they taught me to be responsible. They taught me to make sure that I was organized. And, you know, it's totally different when you think you're taking a class and you're taking your notes, and then someone says, "Hey, man, I'm relying on you to show up at 9 o'clock in the morning and be ready to run this experiment." And you take ownership of that. You're like, I'm not going to let that person down. I'm going to do the best that I can. So I learned a lot of skill sets being in that lab. But one of the things that opened up was that my professor said, "Okay, what kind of work do you want to do?" And I was like, "Well, I want to look at human impacts, and I want to look at how it's going to affect the physiology of the organisms." And without us really knowing, we essentially sort of stumbled on this endocrine disruption type of research work, which very few labs in the country were actually doing. And I mean, we were getting contacted from labs in other countries. We were getting contact from labs within the state, and everyone was, can we send you samples? Can you analyze them? Can you go out in the field and collect samples for us? And for me, I didn't think of it as like, wow, like this is like a huge new wave of research or anything. I just felt like, man, I get to go back on the boat. I get to go on the field and collect more samples. And so it was really, really cool. Um, so specifically in terms of the research that we were doing, we were looking at anthropogenic effects. So how humans affect the environment. And most oftentimes when we think of anthropogenic things, we think of like man-made chemicals. We think of some of like the pesticides and the herbicides and things of that nature, and even some of the pharmaceutical components. But believe it or not, our bodies naturally make hormones, and those hormones were going out into the water. And so we were studying how even tiny quantities of our natural hormones were causing effects with like male feminization. So we were coming across male fish, which would have one male gonad and they would have one ovary in their bodies. And so, I mean, I thought our research was really cool. A lot of people obviously did. And it really sort of changed the dynamics of the regulatory processes here in Southern California, and probably pretty much in California, but mostly in Southern California. Before, most of the governing agencies and the regulatory agencies, they only really cared about chemical pollution. Is the water safe enough for people to go swimming in? You know, if a swimmer goes into the beach and they go into the water, they're going to get E. coli or they're going to get sick because of some of the chemicals in the water. When we did our research and they found out that all these fish were having reproductive issues and other components, they implemented that into their sort of their program. So now every time the agencies go out, they have to take samples and they have to make sure that the endocrine component of the organisms are what they consider to be pretty stable. And so that's important because if you affect the organism's reproduction, then long term you could be affecting the population, right? If all these male fish are becoming female and there's not many male fish, then you can potentially have a population impact. But at the same time, imagine eating a fish that has high levels of estrogen. Then that estrogen could potentially get into your body as well. And so there are human impacts involved in this as well. But as an undergrad, I was doing this type of research. I was like, yeah, this is awesome. This is exactly what I want to do, right? And while I was doing this, my parents started asking me questions, and I would tell them, "Oh, I'm going to the lab. I'm going to do this experiment." They're like, "What's the experiment for?" And I would tell them, and slowly that started to turn them into thinking like, "Oh, marine biology seems like he's actually enjoying it. It seems pretty cool." Okay, before they would tell their family members like, "Oh, hey, Jesus, yeah, he's going to school." That's all they would say. And then after they found out the stuff I was doing, they're like, "Oh, he's going to school and he's taking blood out of fish and he's seeing if they're becoming women," and all. It was all this crazy stuff they were talking about, even though half of the stuff they were saying was wrong. But they were just very excited about what I was doing, and so that really changed their mindset about marine biology. And when I was an undergrad, I mentioned that I struggled through my courses because of my writing. my professor, he's like, dude, you have a great project. This project, I mean, there's so many things you can do with this. I really think you should go into grad school, either get a PhD or get a master's. And I was like, no, like, dude, like to me, someone who's going to go into a PhD or a master's program is like super smart. I can barely write a 2-page paper. There's no way that I'm going to go into that. I'm going to fail. And being the first person in my family to go to college, I figured, you know what? I'm setting the bar already pretty high. I'm going to graduate from college. I'm going to get a job. My kids can then push the bar higher, or someone else can push it higher. I think I'm good. But he was like, no, like you are very good at what you do. You really should think about this. And so he told me, like, go talk to the people that you do work with. So every time I would go on a boat, every time I would go on a trip, every time I would go somewhere to do research, I talked to the people that I was working with from different agencies and say, hey, I really want to do field research. Like, do you think I should go into a grad program? And they're like, look, if you stay with the bachelor's, you'll be able to analyze samples all day in lab. If that's what you want to do, you're good with the bachelor's. But if you want to be like creating a project, if you want to be sort of supervising people, if you want to be in charge of making decisions on how you're going to actually do things, then yeah, you need at least a master's. Or a PhD, probably not so much, but you definitely need a master's. And so just like my mindset was set when I was young that, oh, I'm going to be a marine biologist. I don't really care. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to love. Then it became, I really love research and I want to be a researcher. So if you're telling me that I need to go to grad school, then I'm going to go to grad school, even though I didn't think I was going to be able to do it. And so I went to my professor, said, all right, I think I'm going to go this route. He's like, great. He's like, fill out the application, take the GREs. So I took the test, filled out the application, and I get a letter back saying I didn't get accepted because my GPA was a 2.8 when the minimum requirement was a 3.2. And I think that was one of the first times where I felt like crap because now I got to go tell my professor who's been trying to get me to do this to tell him that I'm not good enough to get into the program. And when I went to go talk to him, he just sat there and he listened. He's like, He's all right. He's like, take a walk with me. We walked down to the department office and he talked to the department chair and he's like, this guy's been in my lab for 2 years, hands down, good worker. I think you probably should give him a shot. So the department chair said, okay, we're going to let you come in and we're going to put you on probation. If you don't get a 3.5 in the first semester, then you're going to be kicked out of the program. And I just stood there like a monkey. I was like, okay. And as I walked out, I didn't realize this, but obviously my experience in his lab, my hands-on experience had proven to him that I was capable of doing the job that could be done. But in my mind, I didn't think I could do it. So when we're walking out, I looked at him and I said, 3.5? Dude, like I can't even get a 3.0. Like that's not gonna happen. And he's like, no, he's like, so you're gonna take courses that are gonna be focused on your research. He's like, and you know that stuff. You've proven that you understand the concepts of physiology, ecotoxicology, and endocrine disruption. He's like, you're fine. And sure enough, he was right. I took courses and I had a 4.0 in my grad. I didn't struggle because all the classes that I took were super interesting to me. And I ended up, you know, graduating with my master's. And really because of him and the hands-on experiences that I had, again, changed my life completely. So since then, I've conducted field research in a lot of different places. I've gone to places like Vancouver, Toronto. I've done a lot of research here in Southern California. I've worked with a lot of agencies, with a lot of governmental agencies, some nonprofit organizations. I subsequently started my own nonprofit research group in 2008 called Pacific Coast Environmental Conservancy. So I do research with obviously my group as well. I was part of a expedition to the middle of the Pacific Ocean a few years back where we were out there for a little bit over 2 months. And we started focusing on plastic debris and talking about nanoplastics and nanoparticles and how those affect marine organisms. And so we've been pushing for obviously a lot of different changes in policies because of some of the results that we've gotten. And I can tell you that I love what I do. I mean, that led me into teaching, which I also enjoy. But my research was my first love. And my professor, I love him and I hate him at the same time. He knew that I was that kid that sat in the back of the room and didn't ask questions. So as I was finishing my grad, he told our marine instructor at Cal State Long Beach, like, oh, Jesus will teach a class for you. And I didn't know he had done this. So semester's about to start. I get an email from the professor that says, "Hey, I need to meet with you so we can talk about your class." And I was like, "The hell are you talking about? Like my class?" He's like, "Yeah, you're teaching my section." And I was like, "No, like the hell?" Like, so he saw that when I was in lab and I was teaching the undergrads that came after me, he felt like you're pretty good at being able to, give people instructions, and you're pretty good at being able to explain things. Try it out. And so I started teaching, and next thing you know, our marine bio person retired. And once I graduated with a master's, the school's like, we need a marine bio instructor, and we need a comparative animal physiologist. Do you want to do it? I was like, all right, I guess. And part of the reasons why they gave me that opportunity was because the people at that school, I guess knew that I was capable of being able to understand the concepts, and that led me down into teaching and research. And so I love research. I'm still doing research. I'm always going to love research. Now that I teach, I realize that it's almost kind of the same thing. Like when I teach, I'm helping students problem solve and try to figure things out. And um, there's a lot of connections to that. And I thrive on the fact that I have students who, when they're eager to learn, man, it's you can see it sounds dumb, but you can see it in their face how excited they get when we get on the boat and we're about to go get samples. And when they're in class, you can see the same excitement when they figure something, like when they can put two and two together. When we're talking about like physiological systems, and I'm talking about like the endocrine system, like, oh dude, now I get it. It's like, oh, and it's sort of the same thing. So I would say that, if you guys have something that you guys really, really love, whatever that is, culinary school, if you like working on cars and you want to become a mechanic, whatever that is, continue doing it. I think it sounds cheesy and old, but if you do something you really love and enjoy, I mean, it's not really work. It's you're just kind of doing what you. Trust me, I get to blab for hours about marine biology and biology to my students, and they probably hate hearing my voice, but I can talk biology all day long. And so for me, it's fun, and my research is even more fun. I get to go out and do all sorts of awesome things. But I would say always ask questions. Don't ever hesitate to try to figure things out. Take advantage of your resources and your experiences. If you can volunteer somewhere and gain actual knowledge, I've sat on the panel that has looked at the applications for UCI students coming into grad school, and I can tell you that almost everyone on that panel feels the same way. You can have a student who has the highest GPA, but didn't volunteer anywhere, doesn't have any other experiences, versus someone who has a lower GPA, but they volunteered places and they have like life experiences. And this person is at equal par with the person with the highest GPA. So that's why I said, um, actual hands-on experiences, it's worth its weight in gold. You're going to learn so much from it. You're going to grow from it. You're going to develop from it, and I think it's only beneficial. So I mean, I don't know how much time there is, but I'm more than happy to answer questions if anyone's interested. And I'm more than happy to answer questions about anything. I can answer questions about Cal State Long Beach, marine biology, sort of like, being that kid in the back of the room that didn't ask questions, anything.
This is where we get to the online version where the teachers every day are hoping and waiting excitedly for a question.
Yeah.
Only to be bitterly disappointed.
You guys, unmute yourselves. I really don't care. Like, ask away.
Giovanni, the loans, when you apply, you go through something called the FAFSA, your financial aid process. We do that pretty much together senior year, but they give you options to take out loans, and obviously there's also
so what type of grades? Oh, sorry. I see this question. What type of grades did you have in high school? In high school, I was like actually a decent student. I think I had a 3.23, a 3.33. I can't remember. I was not horrible, but it wasn't great. But it was sort of the same thing. I struggled through some of the courses where there was a lot of writing. Science I did fine in. So coming out of high school, I thought that's pretty good. I mean, not horrible. But then when I got to college, I'm telling you, the writing really hit me. It took me, I was telling the earlier group, when I wrote my thesis, I wrote a 120-page thesis. It took me about 10 months to write, and that was the one point in my entire stint that I felt like giving up, because there's no way. I would write 2 pages and my professor would proofread them and he would give me a paragraph back saying, this is the only good stuff we can use. I was like, it's gonna take me forever. So I wasn't a great student. I think I was a regular student in high school, and I think I was a regular student in college. But what I did going from undergrad to grad is I really learned what I needed to do to become good. I needed to change my study skills. I needed to change how I organize my notes. I couldn't just read notes and be like, okay, I'm going to read them a day before the test and be like, I'm going to pass this test. No, like there was time invested in these things. All of my science classes had labs with them. And I remember for my inverse zoology class, I was in lab and I was looking at an organism and I'm drawing it. And the teacher came over my shoulder and he's like, what is that? And I'm like, oh, this is a platyhelminthes worm. And he's like, no, that's not what that is. He's like, that does not look anything like that slide. He's like, if you want to pass this class, you need to put time and effort into what you're doing. He's like, you're just doing scribbles. And it was like, oh crap. And so I need to spend more time sort of doing my craft, I guess. But it's always a challenge for a lot of different people. It's different for everyone. So
we're out of time, but if you have questions or you want to be connected with Mr. Reyes, you could ask me or Miss Mayer. We could forward your email to him or vice versa.
Yeah.
But did you have anything to ask or say, Miss Mayer?
No, we actually did have marine biology back in high school. I don't know if you just.
No, I took it. I took it.
Oh,
with
they
Mr.
did?
Johnson.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I'd never heard of it. So I didn't even know it was offered.
So, but other schools in other states do not. So California is kind of the anomaly because obviously we have a huge resource to our west. But Jesus, it was great to see you.
Nice seeing you, Valerie.
And I might be reaching out to you next year.
I'm more than happy.
When things settle down to come in, because I think it's really awesome for our students to hear from people who walk the halls they walk and have sat in the seats they sit in.
Hopefully no one has my old locker because I put some stickers in there.
But thanks again. We appreciate it.
No worries. Maybe even later this year, Jesus, if you have time, like maybe you guys want to have a more in-depth about marine bio. This is a little bit more geared towards
more than happy
experience.
Yeah, more than happy to do that. Just
hey, Jesus can hook you up and get you on a boat one day. That would be fun.
Right.
Yeah, that too. If you ever want to discuss that, Valerie, we can discuss it. Through my organization, I do outreach programs with high schools and middle schools. So if that's something that you're thinking of doing, we can discuss that.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you all later.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Thank you again.